Hi, my name is Mia. I'm 27 years old and work as a graphic designer at a creative agency in the bustling city of New York. Life here is fast-paced, sometimes overwhelming, but there's something about the hum of energy that keeps me going. I live in a small, cozy apartment filled with plants that I affectionately call my green sanctuary. On most days, I balance between work deadlines and catching up with friends, though my heart often drifts to a different time, a time when life was simpler and happiness seemed easier to grasp. I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin, surrounded by rolling fields in a community where everyone knew each other. Childhood felt like an endless summer back then, and every memory seemed to revolve around one person, Ethan. Ethan was my best friend, my confidant, and in a way, my first love. We were inseparable, spending afternoons climbing trees, riding bikes, and sharing dreams about the future. He was the boy with an adventurous heart, always daring me to step out of my comfort zone. But life, as it often does, took us in different directions. Ethan's family moved to California when we were 15. At first, we promised to stay in touch, letters, emails, and the occasional phone call. But as the years went by, the calls became less frequent, and eventually, the letters stopped coming. Even as life moved on, a part of me always wondered what happened to Ethan. Did he still remember me? Did he ever think about the little town we both called home? Sometimes I'd catch myself scrolling through social media, half hoping to stumble upon his profile, but he seemed to have disappeared into the vastness of the world. And then, one unassuming evening, my world shifted. It was a Friday, and I had just finished a long day at work. I decided to unwind at a cozy bookstore cafe near my apartment, a place I often visited to escape the chaos of the city. As I browsed through the shelves, my eyes fell on a book I hadn't seen in years, The Secret Garden. It was one of the books Ethan and I had read together during lazy summer afternoons. I smiled to myself, flipping through its pages, when a familiar voice called my name. Mia? I turned, and there he was, Ethan. He looked older, of course, but his smile was the same, warm and inviting. His hair was shorter now, and there was a certain maturity in his demeanor, but I'd recognize those kind brown eyes anywhere. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen in disbelief. "It's me, Ethan," he said, as if I needed reminding. "Oh my God, Ethan," I finally managed to say, my voice trembling with emotion. We hugged, an embrace filled with years of unspoken words and unanswered questions. It felt like the universe had finally decided to bridge the gap between us, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. We spent hours catching up that evening. Ethan had moved to New York a year ago for work. He was now an architect, designing urban spaces that merge sustainability with functionality. He told me about his travels, his struggles, and the moments of joy that had shaped him into the person he'd become. I shared my journey too, how I ended up in New York, my passion for design, and the challenges of navigating adulthood in a city that never sleeps. As we talked, It felt like no time had passed at all. The connection we once had was still there, buried beneath the years, but alive and strong. Over the next few weeks, we began meeting regularly. Coffee turned into long walks, and long walks turned into late-night conversations. We revisited old memories, laughing about our childhood antics and the dreams we once shared. But as we delved deeper into our past, we couldn't ignore the lingering question, what could have been? Ethan admitted that he'd often thought about me over the years. I looked for you, you know, he said one evening as we walked through Central Park, but I never knew where to start, and then life got in the way. I nodded, understanding all too well. I guess we both got caught up in the whirlwind of growing up, I replied. But the more time we spent together, the clearer it became that our feelings hadn't faded. They had simply been waiting for the right moment to resurface. One evening, as we sat on a park bench watching the city lights flicker against the night sky, Ethan turned to me. Mia, do you ever wonder if we were meant to find our way back to each other? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Tears welled up in my eyes as I nodded. Every day, I confessed. In that moment, it felt like all the years of separation and uncertainty melted away. We weren't just childhood friends reconnecting. We were two souls rediscovering the love they thought was lost forever. The journey ahead wasn't without its challenges. We both carried the weight of our pasts, and the lives we had built were vastly different. But we also knew that what we shared was rare and worth fighting for. As Ethan and I spent more time together, our lives started intertwining in ways that felt natural, yet magical. Weekends were no longer spent alone in my little apartment or working late hours at the agency. Instead, they were filled with laughter, shared meals, and the rediscovery of simple joys. Ethan had this way of making me feel like a teenager again, giddy and carefree. But there was also a depth to our connection now, a maturity that came from years of growth and experiences. We weren't the same kids from Wisconsin anymore, yet in some ways we were still those dreamers who believed in endless possibilities. One Saturday, he took me to a rooftop garden he had helped design. It was a hidden gem in the city, filled with native plants, cozy benches, and a breathtaking view of the skyline. This is where I come when I need to think, he said, leading me to a quiet corner. It's beautiful, I whispered, taking it all in. Ethan turned to me with a smile. I thought of you while working on this project. You always loved nature, and I remember how you used to talk about creating spaces where people could just breathe. My heart swelled at his words. The fact that he had carried a piece of me in his heart all these years was overwhelming. As we sat there, he reached for my hand. Mia, I don't want to let you slip away again. I know we're different people now, but I feel like this us deserves a second chance. Tears filled my eyes as I nodded. I feel the same, Ethan. But are we ready for what this might mean? He squeezed my hand gently. I think we're exactly where we're meant to be. From that moment, we both committed to exploring this new chapter together. It wasn't always easy, balancing our demanding jobs while nurturing a budding relationship took effort. There were times when doubts crept in, moments when the ghosts of our pasts threatened to pull us apart, but we faced those challenges head-on, leaning on each other for support. One evening, after a particularly long day, Ethan surprised me by recreating one of our childhood memories. He had set up a small picnic in my apartment, complete with peanut butter sandwiches and homemade lemonade. "Remember when we used to do this by the lake?" he asked, his eyes twinkling. I laughed, touched by the gesture. "You even remembered the lemonade. I used to insist it had to be sweet, but not too sweet." "Of course I remembered," he said softly. "Those were some of the happiest days of my life." As we ate, we talked about our dreams for the future. Ethan shared his vision of designing spaces that brought communities together, while I spoke about my desire to create art that told stories. It was during that conversation that we realized how much our dreams aligned. "We could even collaborate someday," Ethan suggested. "Imagine combining architecture and design to create something truly unique." The idea excited me. It wasn't just about the possibility of working together. It was about building something meaningful with someone who understood me completely. Months turned into a year, and our bond only grew stronger. We made it a point to visit our hometown together, revisiting the places that had shaped our childhood. Walking through the familiar streets, hand in hand, felt surreal. At one point we stopped by the old oak tree, where we used to carve our initials. The carvings were faint now, weathered by time, but they were still there, a testament to the bond we had always shared. "This tree has seen it all," Ethan said, running his fingers over the initials. "And it's still standing," I added with a smile. As we stood there, I realized something profound. Love doesn't fade with time. It evolves. The love Ethan and I shared as kids had transformed into something deeper, more enduring. When we returned to the city, Ethan surprised me with another heartfelt gesture. He had designed a small personal project, a painting studio for me, tucked away in a corner of his office building. "I wanted you to have a space to create, a space that's yours," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. I was overwhelmed with emotion. "Ethan, this is incredible. I don't even know what to say." "Say you'll keep filling it with your art and our memories," he replied. In that moment, I knew I had found my forever. Ethan wasn't just my lost love. He was my found love, my partner, my home. Our story is still unfolding, but one thing is certain. Some loves are worth waiting for, worth fighting for. Ethan and I may have taken the long road back to each other, but every step was worth it. And as I sit here in my new studio, sketching the skyline with Ethan by my side, I feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Life may be unpredictable, but when love finds you again, It's nothing short of extraordinary. The days that followed felt like living in a dream I didn't want to wake up from. Ethan and I had settled into a rhythm that felt natural, almost as if those years apart had only strengthened what we shared. Life wasn't perfect, but it was beautiful in its imperfections. One crisp autumn evening, Ethan invited me to a charity gala hosted by his architectural firm. I wasn't particularly fond of formal events, but the excitement in his voice convinced me. "You'll love it," he said, his eyes lighting up. "And besides, I need you there. You're my good luck charm." The event was held in a grand ballroom adorned with crystal chandeliers and floral arrangements that seemed to bloom under the soft golden lights. Ethan looked dashing in his tailored navy suit, and I found myself stealing glances at him throughout the evening. As we mingled with his colleagues, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of pride. Ethan was in his element, charismatic, confident, and passionate about his work, but every now and then his eyes would search for me in the crowd, and when our gazes met, it felt like we were the only two people in the room. Later that evening, during a quiet moment on the balcony overlooking the city, Ethan turned to me with a serious expression. "Mia," he began, taking my hands in his, "there's something I've been meaning to tell you." My heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "You've always been my greatest what if." Even when life pulled us apart, I carried you with me. And now that you're here, I don't want to waste another moment wondering. I want to build a life with you, Mia. Something real, something lasting. Tears filled my eyes as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I know it's soon, and I know we're still figuring things out," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "But I also know that I don't want to do any of it without you." He opened the box to reveal a simple yet elegant ring, a delicate band with a small diamond that seemed to catch the light perfectly. "Mia, will you marry me?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. The weight of his words, the sincerity in his eyes, it was overwhelming. But as I looked at him, I realized that every fiber of my being already knew the answer. "Yes," I whispered, my voice shaking with emotion. "Yes, Ethan, I will." He slipped the ring onto my finger and we embraced, the city lights below us creating a magical backdrop. For a moment, I knew I would cherish forever. The months that followed were a whirlwind of planning and dreaming. We decided to keep the wedding small and intimate, inviting only close friends and family. It felt right, an event that celebrated not just our love, but also the journey that had brought us back together. We chose a picturesque vineyard in upstate New York for the ceremony, surrounded by golden fields and a sky that seemed to stretch endlessly. On the day of the wedding, as I walked down the aisle toward Ethan, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. This was where I was meant to be, and he was the person I was meant to share my life with. The vows we exchanged were simple but heartfelt. Ethan spoke about the joy of rediscovering love and how he promised never to let go again. I shared my gratitude for finding not just a partner, but also a best friend in him. Our first dance as husband and wife was to a song we both loved from our childhood, a nostalgic melody that perfectly encapsulated our journey. As the night wore on, surrounded by laughter, music, and the warmth of our loved ones, Ethan and I stole a quiet moment under the stars. "We did it," he whispered, holding me close. "Yes, we did," I replied, resting my head against his chest. Life after the wedding felt like a continuation of our love story, but with new chapters waiting to be written. We moved into a charming brownstone that Ethan had been eyeing for months, a space where we could grow together, fill it with memories, and create a home. One evening, as we unpacked boxes and talked about our future, Ethan turned to me with a playful grin. "You know, we're not done dreaming yet," he said. "What's next on our list?" I laughed, realizing that with Ethan, life would always be an adventure, whether it was traveling to places we'd only seen in books, starting a family, or simply enjoying the quiet moments together. I knew we had everything we needed. Ethan had been my lost love, but now he was my forever. And as we stood there, surrounded by the chaos of moving boxes and the promise of a new beginning, I couldn't help but feel grateful for the journey that had brought us here. Sometimes love takes time, but when it finds its way back to you, it's worth every moment of the wait.